Today, we are pleased to be joined on the line by ESPN SportsCenter host. He's been with ESPN since 2008. You can follow him at Kevin Connors ESPN. Kevin Connors, Steve Tasker, and Matty Glab here in Buffalo. Thanks for joining us. And we got to ask you the first thing out of the box. I hope you and your family are doing well during the pandemic. Is everybody safe and sound?
Steve, we are. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it's, I tell people all the time, I say, we've been inconvenienced, which relative to everybody else is nothing. So we're all doing well. I want to say, man, do I love hearing, oh, what a great tackle by Tasker. I mean, what I wouldn't do to hear that again in a game in 2020.
Well, every time I hear that, Kevin, I hurt. So you keep that to yourself. Hey, how did you become a Bills fan? Why? How? Where are you? Where are you from? I mean, give us your history.
No, I mean, I'm the outlier. I grew up on Long Island, and I grew up on Long Island in the 80s and early 90s when, obviously we were slugging it out with the Jets. And then, of course, in Super Bowl 25 against the Giants, I'm the Bills fan in my school. Everyone else is rooting for the Giants. So my dad was from Central New York, is from Central New York. He's from just outside of Utica. And he was a Bills fan, of course, dating back to the AFL days. So I inherited that from him, and it's been an incredible ride being a Bills fan in New York, in Jets and Giants country, and then, of course, now in New England in Patriots country.
Well, it's difficult to be a pilgrim in an unholy land, so I feel for you.
What's your favorite Bills memory, and what about your favorite moment from 2019? This team had a pretty great season. Didn't make it too far in the playoffs, but a lot of high hopes for them in 2020. So what's your favorite memory overall, and what about a favorite moment from last season?
Yeah, that's a great question, Maddie. I mean, I think probably like a lot of Bills fans, it's got to be the Thanksgiving Day game. We had family in town. My folks were here, and my older brother was as well. And so, we get Thanksgiving dinner. I don't want to say out of the way, but we have Thanksgiving dinner, and then it's settle in and watch the Bills. And, boy, we played so well in that game, and to do it on national TV in Dallas. The game that Josh Allen played, of course, was just magnificent. So I think that's probably the favorite memory of 2020. And, look, 2019.
19, yeah.
Look, the playoff game hurts, but, Steve, you know what? It didn't sting as much to me, and maybe you disagree, maybe listeners disagree. It didn't sting as much because we're on the ascent, right? I mean, if I feel like if this were our last bite at the apple, it would really kind of hurt a little bit more. But I feel like, we played well on the road. You learn a lot from a game like that, and maybe we point back to that game in Houston and say, you know what, that was the one that got this team to where we wanted them to be all along.
We're with Kevin Connors, ESPN SportsCenter host, big Bills fan. Also, do you ever, give us an idea, do you ever attend games in Buffalo? Have you ever, or do you do so on a regular basis? How's that for you?
It's crazy that the first Bills game in Buffalo that I've been to was in 2017. My brother and I said, look, we're going up. Rex is coaching. It's a Thursday night game. We can make it work. So we went up. It was the Color Rush game. I'm almost sure we wore the red uniforms that game. But it's 2017 against the Jets. Obviously, that wasn't a great game to be at. But growing up on Long Island, I was so far away from Buffalo, never had the chance. In college, I'm in Ithaca, but it just never worked out. And then, of course, now as a professional, I work most weekends. Now, I've been to a ton of Bills games on the road. Tons of Bills games at the Meadowlands. I went to a Bills-Cardinals game in Arizona back in 99. Special memory, 2013. My wife and her parents were living in Tampa Bay at the time. We went down there to visit them, and we saw a Bucs game in Tampa Bay. But, yeah, the one game that I've seen in Buffalo was 2017. But we've got to change that, if not this season, next season.
You climbed the ladder all the way up to ESPN. Hosting SportsCenter is something that many people aspire to do in the sports world. Did you ever think that would become a reality in your career?
Maddie, it's a great question. So again, my dad grew up just outside of Utica, and I can remember as a kid we would go up to the house that he grew up in over the summer, and I can vividly remember this is pre-cable for where I grew up on Long Island. We didn't have cable yet, but I can remember going up to his house in Ilion, New York, and there was this channel that played only sports, and it had this show that ran highlights of every game, and I just thought it was mind-blowing to me at the time. It was probably 84, 85, and I'm thinking, what is this, and how do I get it? So ESPN was always on the radar in that sense, but to be perfectly honest, it was never one day I'm going to be a SportsCenter anchor. It was more one day I'm going to be a sports anchor at a local station like Marv Albert was at WNBC when I was growing up. And I figured, you know what, I'll do the sports on the desk there, and maybe, God willing, I'll get to do some play-by-play. And can you imagine how great it would be to travel with the team to all these games? And then all of a sudden I worked in New York City for a while, and the ESPN opportunity came up, and it was a life changer for me in every way. So it was never on my radar, but I'm certainly glad it came on the radar.
Kevin, how hard has it been to anchor SportsCenter with no sports?
Steve, that's the million-dollar question, and I will take myself out of the equation and speak up on behalf of my colleagues at ESPN. It's remarkable the job that they do on a daily basis coming up with content, because you're right. You know, the show must go on, and the show has gone on since the day that I was sitting on the college basketball desk, and all these college conferences started shutting it down, and it was like, hey, guys, this is all stopping for a while. You know, and they've done a remarkable job of putting programming on the air. I've been back on campus probably about 10, 12 times since this has started. It's a ghost town. We've got the people who find the video and cut the video working on laptops at home in their kitchen or in their living room. We have a Spartan staff on campus, and yet you probably wouldn't notice it watching it on TV. The thing that the biggest adjustment for me, Steve, is doing this. I had never done talk radio as a professional, and of course, with the number of shows that we have done being cut down on the TV side, they said, hey, how would you like to try doing radio? And I said, of course, I'd love it. Talk about challenging. I mean, you know, TV, you can sort of fake it with how about the 10 best plays of Jim Kelly's career. Radio, that's a little bit tougher, and talk radio especially. So, you know, we got a ton of mileage out of a Jordan documentary. We've been forecasting what sports may look like for a long time. So it's been challenging, but I tell you what, it's times like these where you say, I respect the hell out of my teammates because they've done an incredible job.
Here on Talk Radio at One Bills Live, I mean, we've discussed the Bills in every way possible and dreamt up this 2020 season and what it could be and what we hope it to be, with fans in the stands, with a talented team who makes it deep into the playoffs. And it's pretty obvious that this Bills hype has reached outside of the Western New York bubble. The Bills are starting to get a lot of attention in a league-wide sense and in national media. So what's the Bills' reaction in Bristol, if you could put your finger on it? Are the Bills still the favorites in the East, or are they the favorites in the East, or are people being a little weary of pointing to the Bills as someone who could win that division this season?
Maddie, I think until last week it was, yes, the Bills are the team to beat. I don't know that that's fully changed, but I think people are saying, hey, wait a minute. The Patriots signed Cam Newton, and here we go. Bill Belichick's going to work his magic on him. I think for what it's worth, it was a great signing for the Patriots. I still think Cam Newton's an effective weapon in the league, and he's got more weapons to throw to now than he ever had in Carolina, in my opinion. But I still think we're the team to beat. I mean, look, I was trying to think of this, and Steve, maybe you guys have a better handle on this. Is there a better wide receiver core in the league than Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, we've been talking about that as well. They're up. They've got to be in the conversation. No question about it. Their experience and their abilities and all the things that they've shown thus far, they're in the conversation. It's hard to say who's going to be better or worse or whatever, and a lot of it still comes down to Josh Allen. But, yeah, I mean, they have done everything they can to give Josh as many guys as he has to have to be successful, and now we just hope we get a chance to see him put it together.
Right. And look, the line seems to be, as good as it's been in a long time. You expect Devin Singletary to make strides. I had a chance to talk with Kyle Whittingham a few weeks ago, head coach at Utah. He was raving about the Zach Moss signing for the Bills. And obviously we addressed things defensively. So the point being, Maddie, to your original question, I think we are the most talented team in the division. I think anything less than being a playoff team again this year is a big disappointment. But those are the expectations that you need to have when you have talent like this. So until the Patriots are knocked off the perch, I will believe them to be a tough challenger, but I still think that we're as talented as anybody, if not more so, in the entire AFC East.
We're speaking with ESPN SportsCenter host Kevin Connors. Kevin, as I just mentioned it, and you said too, that the expectations are through the roof for this. Well, I say through the roof, but highly enhanced this year as opposed to any other year we've seen. So I'm going to ask you a question, an either-or question. Who's Josh Allen going to be closer to this year? Is he going to have closer to a breakout season like Lamar Jackson, or is he going to be more like a guy like Mitch Trubisky? Who's he going to be closer to?
Please don't say Mitch.
No, I mean, listen, I think we have long passed the Mitchell Trubisky level, Steve, in my opinion. You know, Lamar is such a tough guy because, you know, he came on like gangbusters, and he's such a unique weapon. Listen, Steve, you know better than anybody. I mean, it used to be a very different ball game. You would draft a quarterback, you would ease them into the situation. Now we're thrusting guys right into the role and demanding that they succeed because other guys have. We forget that Peyton Manning took a little while to become Peyton Manning. Even Peyton Manning took a little while to become Peyton Manning. So, listen, I'm pleased with the progress that he's made. That doesn't mean that he doesn't still have those moments where you say, God, why would you try that throw? Why not do this? But I think we've got to be a little bit patient with the maturation process of a guy who didn't play at a Power 5 school and is still really, really young. So I've been pleased with the progress that we've seen. Now, does he need to take a giant step given what we just talked about, the talent that's surrounding him? There's no question. But do I think it's attainable? Do I think Josh Allen is going to become Drew Brees this season? No, I don't. But do I think Josh Allen is going to far surpass what Mitchell Trubisky will be in 2020? I don't think there's even a conversation about that.
With how this roster looks, with the division, the departure of Tom Brady, with the questions that there are with this season, and the fact that the Bills returned so many starters and pretty much their entire coaching staff, what's a hot take for the Bills this season, whether that be a positive one or a negative one?
Maddie, a hot take is this is a team that has the talent to at least play in the AFC Championship game. It's hard to say this team Super Bowl or bust because, look, as both of you know, so many things can happen over the course of a season. And listen, how fortunate were we last year with injuries, right? I mean, there aren't too many big-name players who were injured last season. So that, of course, is the great equalizer in the NFL. And I'm not a cheerleader to the extent that, you know, I joke around each year on social media. I don't see anything other than 19-0. Well, I'm not saying that realistically. But do I think that this team is capable of playing for at least an AFC championship? I do. I think if we don't make the playoffs this year, it's a big disappointment. And by the way, again, that's where we should be given the talent level of this team. But I think AFC championship is within reason. That's as hot as I'm going to go right now. But beyond that, I also think is possible.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. I think there's a range between disappointment and, you know, over the moon saying taking that next step. The AFC Championship certainly is the top end of where you can realistically say any team's going. I mean, all 32 teams could say, hey, we're going to the Super Bowl. But, you know, saying you get deep into the playoffs is the upper end of the expectation range, and the lower end is you got to get in the playoffs. If you don't get in the playoffs, it's a huge disappointment. Where is the line where it says, you know what, that's where I thought we should have gotten? What's the level of success the Buffalo Bills have to reach for you to say, okay, we're still going, let's go? You know what I mean? What's the one where you end the season still optimistic, even though maybe disappointed?
Yeah, again, I think, Steve, I think it's playoffs. I would imagine that you would agree. I mean, look, we were a playoff team a year ago, and it wasn't it wasn't backdooring into the playoffs because the Bengals pulled off a miracle to beat the Ravens. You know, I mean, this was a legitimate playoff team all year long, and it wasn't a surprise. It may have been a surprise to some people who didn't buy into what Brandon Beane, was putting together here, and what Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier and company were Brian Dable were coaching up. But it wasn't a shocker in my opinion. So, look, to be leading a playoff game this past season at the half and to essentially bring everyone back, and not only that, add one of the top 10 playmakers in the league and draft well again and replenish things defensively, to me, it's playoffs or bust. And people have questions to answer if this isn't a playoff team, barring massive injuries in 2020. Of course, the great unknown being COVID-19. But, if all things are equal, if things go as best possible, and this is a season that goes forward and everyone's healthy, if it's not the playoffs, to me, it's a big disappointment.
With how this roster looks, could you point to a certain player as being this year's X factor for the Bills?
Again, the obvious one, of course, is the quarterback, right? But that's true of every team in the league. And, you want things to go well, with Stephon Diggs coming in, knowing that he's a guy who's used to being a playmaker, and that at that position, Steve knows as well as anybody, you've got to feed a guy like that. You've got to keep him happy. So discounting, that's the wrong word, not counting those two, to answer your question, Matty, would probably be Devin Singletary. I mean, it was obviously the second half of the year for him. We went to him on a much more frequent basis, and he became a legitimate weapon. Well, now, he starts the year as the guy. And though there is quality at the backup position, we think, with Zach Moss coming in as a rookie, Devin's going to be called on to be the guy who carries the load. So to me, he would probably be the X factor offensively. And then defensively, this is probably, I'm not exactly giving you a hot take here, but, seeing Tremaine and how he continues to mature. I mean, we forget sometimes just how young he is, how little football he's played, and how, from a birth certificate standpoint, how young he is. And yet what he's already shown as an NFL player has been so encouraging. And, is he ready to take the next step to not only be considered among the better players in the AFC at his position, but among the best defensive players in the NFL? So those would be two spots that I would pick.
All right, Kevin, forgive me for not knowing. You went to Ithaca College?
I did.
Okay. So earlier in the show, I shared one of my most embarrassing moments on a golf course when I threw a golf club and it stuck in the green, and we were playing with the golf pro, and it was an ugly affair. But since you went to Ithaca College, you're familiar with the term Cortica.
Of course.
Okay. Is there anything that happened to you during your 4 years at Ithaca College when the week-long festival with Cortland State that turns into a cross between Woodstock and, and a riot? So is there anything that you can share with us about that embarrassing happened to you during your 4 years at Cortica?
That is a tremendous question, and I'm not going to.
I know it is. I can't wait for this. I know, because I had kids that were part of Cortica, and I know it's a question that has to be asked.
Well, so I came into this interview figuring that we would talk about memories of Bills games that I've been to, and I was going to say 1999, I went to the Bills-Cardinals game in Arizona. If you ask me for specific memories, I'm a little hazy on some of that. Now, as for Cortica, I will tell you that for my junior and senior year, I was doing the games on radio. So that prevented me from partaking in any of the festivities. And my first experience with the Cortica game was my brother went to Cortland. So I was rooting for Cortland at Ithaca before I ever went to Ithaca. So too young to have been drinking when I was in high school, I can tell you that we illegally got into the game that day. But I don't have any great stories of 4-minute keg stands in the parking lot before the game, just because I was a part of the broadcast so often. But if we're talking about other games, that's probably more of a fertile ground for a longer conversation.
Kevin Connors, ESPN SportsCenter. Thanks for being with us. You dodged the last question artfully, and I applaud you for it. Thanks for joining us.
Steve, Maddie, it was great to talk to you guys. Thanks for having me on, and go Bills.